What's up, beer geeks? I am Chris Cohen.
I'm Chris Crowe.
We are advanced Cicerones and beer scholars. We are back for another comparison of classic styles. Today, we have got Trappist Dubbel, Chimay Red, and two different Scotch ales, Wee Heavies. Wee Heavy, one of my favorite styles. A lot of times we just taste the beers beforehand, but this time we're just going to have the discussion live because I think it's fun. This is a fun one. I think my initial thought was this one's not that hard.
Yeah, that's what we were kind of thinking. What we do know about Wee Heavies is that they can also have a different character from within the style. So let's throw the McEwans in there as well.
Right.
And maybe that's going to increase the complexity of the comparison a little bit, but that'll be good, right? Because we want it to be more difficult than we think it is.
The Traquair Wee Heavy and the McEwan's Wee Heavy, pretty similar. I'm surprised they're that similar.
They really are. I thought we were going to have a tale of three different beers, but I do think you could make some really sound comparisons between Wee Heavy as a class based on these two beers with Dubbel as a class.
With the Wee Heavies, the focus of the flavor is really on like a caramely and toasty malt flavor profile and aroma. What I think, though, every time I have these kind of beers is that this kind of common understanding about them that they are like really sweet. Of course, the BJCP guidelines say like may or may not say this, but cloying is never like acceptable for any beer, right? But I do think that a lot of people think of Wee Heavy as like among the sweetest of beers. Like it is really heavy and sweet and sticky. I always thought that the BJCP's descriptions of all the Scottish style ales, including the Wee Heavy, were a little off, having gone to Scotland and tasted a lot of beer. I think they got it more correct in these most recent versions, but I always found those beers to be drier than the BJCP descriptions actually stated.
Yeah, and I think it's like once you adjust to the category a little bit, it's like, yeah, in the balance, there's not really like a standout hop character that helps you offset what you're thinking is like sweetness, but none of these finish even remotely cloying.
Totally. Okay, here's one of my favorite things to talk to people about who are learning to taste beer. Separating actual sweetness from the impression of sweetness. Okay, you associate caramel with sweetness because every time you have the flavor caramel, for the most part, it's probably in some candy or something, right? So it's with a bunch of sugar. It's in a thing that is actually sweet. And your brain is telling you when you smell or taste a thing that smells or tastes like caramel that it is also sweet. But actually, it might not be. I'm not saying that Wee Heavy is a dry beer, okay? Don't get me wrong. But I am saying that is something you have to train your brain to do starting at the certified Cicerone level.
Yeah, and one of the ways that you can do that is to plug your nose when you take a sample and swallow the beer and determine kind of how that beer is sitting on your palate, having robbed yourself of the aroma. And then you swallow the sample and then breathe out with retronasal. You're kind of getting all that impression of whatever maybe like sweet impression style flavors there are, but you've separated it from how it feels on your palate.
Because without your nose, all you can taste is like sweet, bitter, sour, right? Those primary flavors, right? It's not until you're getting some retronasal action that you actually start saying, oh, it's caramel or it's strawberry. You don't get that just from putting things in your mouth and swallowing them. You get that from getting it in your nasal passage.
We're waxing poetically about how Wee Heavy is not, as sweet as maybe people think it is, but in comparison to Dubbel, that's a good exercise. If you smell Chimay Red, there's some like fruity characteristics, something that maybe even might remind you of toast or caramel. But if you take a sip of that bad boy and plug your nose, I mean, it is dry as a bone.
Bone dry.
It is just wicks all the moisture away. There is no residual sugar sitting on your palate, and you are just completely absent all those things you thought were super sweet.
Especially in this comparison. It comes across as super dry. I mean, it'd be interesting to actually taste it next to like a Saison and see, is it bone dry? Right?
Yeah.
Things change when you start doing stuff like that. If you're, say, taking a test and you get a beer that looks like this, and by the way, good luck. You're not going to tell these apart visually. We like to say that in just about every comparison. Don't rely on that. The body difference is huge. The sweetness on the Wee Heavies does seem pretty big compared to the Dubbel.
And the thing that can help you just break the tie if you're just super confused because you're kind of getting dry raisin, sweet grape, whatever these like competing fruit flavors are. It might be light, but Chimay Red does have a signature light phenol character.
Totally.
And you're just never, ever going to get that in a good Wee Heavy.
Pretty much all Belgian beers, I think all Belgian beers, are basically yeast driven in their flavor profile. And they usually have some phenol component, a fair amount of esters. And so that's the big kind of dead giveaway. You can pretty much get it it straight up from just smelling these two, even before you even put them in your mouth. You're getting some phenolic character. That's maybe a little clove, maybe a little pepper, stuff like that from this Belgian Dubbel. Basically, if you were taking a test and you were handed a amber brown beer like this and asked, is it a Dubbel or is it a Wee Heavy? You should be able to just sniff it and say there are or are not phenols.
And no shame if you need to taste it. That like super dry finish can really help you out breaking a tie, but that's the defining difference here for sure.
I was about 21 years old, 21, 22. Went to this bar in Tallahassee, Florida, that only sold imports. That was like this cool thing that they were doing back in the day. I don't know. I can't really say pre-craft beer. It was pre-craft beer. It was during the early like microbrew days.
We call them craft breweries, Dad.
Back then, this bar was like the way to be cool and different and have good beer is by only having imports because American beer fucking sucks. And that was in mid-late 90s. And McEwan's Wee Heavy, I was just looking at this giant menu of imports. No idea what any of it was. Totally not into beer. I didn't want to drink freaking Bud Light or whatever like all the other college kids. So I ordered this thing called McEwan's Wee Heavy. And let me tell you, fucking hated it. Disgusting. Disgusting beer. Thought it was just like cough syrup. I finished it though because I wanted to be cool. Peer pressure is a motherfucker, kids. And here I am, just a few years later, one of my favorite styles.
It's funny to have your experience bookended like that because it's like you were exposed to something that early in your, import beer drinking journey, and then now it's like impossible to get Wee Heavies, it seems like, or other like Scotch style beers. There's reliable imports still. You can go pick either of these ones up, but that's not where American ingenuity in craft brewing seemed to go even remotely. So you start hating it, then you don't get it all that much, and you get super into beer, and then you're like, you kind of want what you can't have.
I'm impressed with myself is I remember that because I really wanted to like beer, and I thought this one will be interesting and different. And I can remember some other beers I had at that bar. It was the only bar in Tallahassee, Florida that at that time that had interesting beer. And I used to go there all the time. It was called Fatties and Skinnies. I hope someone out there is like, oh my God, Fatties. Because it only lasted a couple years. I had a couple of weird things there back in the day that even if I didn't love them, made me aware that there was some really interesting stuff out there. And it was one of the things that kickstarted my journey.
If you fancy yourself a certain kind of beer style drinker and you haven't had one of these Wee Heavies in a while, don't take our word for it. Go pick up a couple.
Malt is nice.
Maybe we don't push for the year of the lager right now. We just say it's the year of the malt.
Right. Yeah.
We'll just keep pushing for it.
It'll happen one day. Someone will figure out how to do like bio malt formation or something.
Yeah. Just mash up all the hop buzzwords into the malting.
We'll just call like 2-row. Simcoe. We'll figure it out. Yeah. We're gonna plot.
Or beer labels just won't even reference the hops. They'll be different combos of the malt.
Made with caramel 60 and Carafa.
This is Maris Otter and Pilsner.
Everyone will line up for it. Hype Beast Malty.
Cheers to malt lines in the rest of 2022.
I'll wait in line for that. Cheers, y'all.